Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar book review. This one is going to be for Avatar The Last Airbender North and South Omnibus Edition. So, pretty cool here. The main notable thing about this is that I suppose finally we'll see the completed spine image across the 5 Team Guri-Huru books. Also kind of significant, should be noted here, Dark Horse finally managed to put a book out on the release date that they originally set for it. Hasn't happened in years, like absolute years. It's been a super long time the last time a book got announced with a release date and it stuck to that release date and wasn't delayed multiple times. Now, what does it say? That, it took, the 5th reprint book where there's not a lot of like extra stuff to do except basically the spine image to make that happen. But, they'll say it's, pandemic induced and stuff like that, even though it's been going on since well before the pandemic. But, we'll leave that aside for now. A new Avatar book is out and we're here to talk about it. So, as ever, just in case you guys are unfamiliar with the different editions and stuff like that, what's going on here? Like I said, North and South is the 5th Avatar comic trilogy. So, there's The Promise first up, then The Search, then The Rift, Smoke and Shadow, and now the 5th book here, North and South. It's the last one done by Team Guri-Huru and Jean Luen Yang as the creative team. Makes me interested in the next comic series, In Balance, which I assume will get an omnibus edition at some point. It hasn't been announced yet what they're going to do with it, because will they have Team Guri-Huru do this style to match up with the rest of them, or will they bring Peter Wortman in to do his art in this same sort of, style with the white background and characters faded into the background and so on, or not? We don't actually know what's going on there. I assume omnibus for that book will come out. There's just a few questions sort of surrounding it, of course. As for editions, like I said, this is the omnibus edition, so the basic way to treat this is that it's sort of the paperback collected edition. 3-in-1. All 3 parts of North and South are in this book, with a lot of the extras that came in the library edition. So it's sort of basically everything, just at like a sort of cheaper price point. So it's $24.99 US as like the full retail price. You'll definitely get it for cheaper online from Amazon or wherever you get it from. But that's the value of this, is that it is better value for the most part than buying the 3 individual versions. So just to kind of quickly cover that, the book originally came out in 3 parts. North and South Part 1, 2, and 3. And all 3 of those books are included here in this one, which is why you can see the sort of thickness of the omnibus is as thick as it is, because it is 3 books in 1. So with that out of the way, we can address, I suppose, what will end up being, for the most part, your sort of buying decision with regards to editions. In that, for the most part, I don't really recommend these anymore, given that the omnibus now exists. Your buying decision is going to be between the North and South Library Edition and the Omnibus Edition. So the size comparison is the most obvious sort of thing. Do you want a big hardcover book where you get the art a little bit bigger, or do you want the cheaper edition and that's more sort of handheld, easy to read in the Omnibus? Because as we go through this, the only stuff that basically is in this big book that's not in the Omnibus is the annotations on the sides of the pages of this book. So you can see art's a bit bigger, but not all the way out to the edges, because you have space for the annotation text here from the creative teams on the sides. And again, it's of like 200 plus pages. Only about 50 or less pages of the book feature those annotations. So do you like the idea of like 3/4 of your book having basically blank borders just for the pages that do have text? That's a decision you have to make for yourself. Otherwise, the main extra that's part of sort of North and South and so on are these sort of art extra pages at the back, along with a special kind of piece of art that Team Guru did to sort of celebrate their completion of their run on the Avatar comics. So you do get basically everything with this book, in that you get the 3 parts, of course. When you get to the end of the Omnibus edition, you get to these pages that show you the cover for North and South Part 1, the page that features Part 2 and 3 covers, and then, like I said, you do get into stuff like they give you the library edition cover, as well as that piece of art that I just showed you, and then you get into the concept art extras. And it's all here. What seems like is the case with this book, though, is that they don't include this page at the end of the library edition by Gene Yang, basically giving his sort of, goodbye to the series. So that's kind of just an interesting thing. I think the Promise Omnibus didn't feature 1 page of the art extras, and this one also has done sort of the same thing. Otherwise, like, it's all here, and these are definitely like the most sort of value for money editions overall. So that's the main thing with the Omnibus format is that it's just the 3 books put together, but you also do get those extras, so like it is nice that they're there. Like I said, annotations, I personally, even as a hardcore Avatar fan, get very little out of the annotations. I don't think they add enough to sort of justify such a gulf in price between them, of like paying like what, 40-50 for this versus like half the price for this. They're fun, but most of the information you get out of them is probably on Avatar Wiki somewhere. It is probably the main point I'd make with that, and it's more of a case of, if you're a collector, you like the physical kind of stuff, the hardcover has that value. Otherwise, like, if you just want the book, a physical copy of the book, this is definitely, I think, the way to go. So that brings us to pretty much, I guess, the last thing here, which is the spine image. There you can see partial image here on the cover, and that is on the spine, because what we're actually making is, on the spine image across all the Omnibus editions, we're actually making the North and South cover. Slightly squished together, but we're making this image just without the background. So let's see how they finished it up, and I'll address like the issues with that in just a second. So that is where we stand with it. Let me just stack it here so you can see it relatively nicely. So you can see specifically North and South and Smoke and Shadow, pretty accurate overall, in that you can see like on Sokka's face, it's accurate. Not a ton of repetition. The edge of his face was sort of cut off here. The rest of it's on this book, so that is pretty accurate overall, and it's almost more the height of the books that actually gets in the way, more than anything, in terms of slight issues between these two. The problem that everyone has noted when especially Smoke and Shadow came out is that's a pretty major error there. Huge repetition already included on the Rift going into Smoke and Shadow. What happened here? How did they get it so wrong? There was only one new thing to do with the Omnibus editions, and it was basically to get this feature right. And they messed it up kind of right in the middle of it. So what really went wrong? I'll have a segment in just a second where I'm on my computer showing my image editing software, where I'll go into a little bit more detail. But in conclusion, I think I more or less came to the idea that the error is not Smoke and Shadow, the error is the Rift. Look at the Rift. Look how much thicker the Rift is than Smoke and Shadow. And it ends up being the case that if the Rift was basically normally sized, like Smoke and Shadow and all the other books, and you just cut off from this side how much bigger it is, it'd be perfect. Because basically Aang's arm is basically what's repeated, and if this book was normal sized, the Rift wouldn't even have Aang's arm on it. That's the problem. Now, maybe you can make the case that the Rift is correct, Smoke and Shadow was where the error came in, but they realized that the only way to correct this effectively is to accurately put out North and South to match up with Smoke and Shadow. and make the rift the point where the error actually is. So I'll basically be making that point again, just showing it more clearly visually to you on my computer. Okay, final spine analysis time here. So, North and South is the new book here. You can see it actually matches up quite nicely with Smoke and Shadow. Sokka's face is probably the easiest place to see this. It doesn't include his ear on this side, but North and South does actually include the ear. So it is actually pretty accurate, as accurate as you could probably hope to get it. Way different than the rift into Smoke and Shadow, which was what caused the problem. So you can sort of see immediately sort of what the problem actually is. The rift, looking at the five of them together, is a much thicker book than The Promise, The Search, Smoke and Shadow, and North and South. Why is that the case? We all thought it was just like, I guess they just need to include a large amount of the image on this one book, otherwise they won't fit it in, or something like that. But they seem to have managed it quite nicely here, so you go back to the rift as being the problem. So this yellow box is the width of one of the normal sized books. So the width of The Promise, the width of The Search, Smoke and Shadow, North and South. So if we basically go up to the edge of the rift, this is how thick it should be. So the image should end basically here, right at the edge of Aang's arm. And what do you know? That same edge of Aang's arm is exactly where Smoke and Shadow starts off from. So I think this immediately points out this is the error. The rift was not meant to, I guess, be as thick as it is. To fit it in here, they included more of the image, and I guess at some point when Smoke and Shadow was being done, whatever happened here, you know, the width that they were printing it at changed, and they, you know, calculated it based off something else, that they thought that the rift was also this thick. I don't know where in the process this error actually happened, but I think it does fundamentally come down to the fact that the rift is like quite a bit bigger than the other books, and that's exactly the error here. You can see it the whole way down, that this part of Sokka's face and his hood is exactly the part that's repeated, matching pretty much perfectly. So where do we go from here if you want a completed one? I don't think Dark Horse have ever acknowledged the error on this or anything like that, but I suppose maybe keep an eye out for editions of the Rift if you see them in stores as the years goes on. There might be sort of like a reprint, a second edition of the Rift that is more in line with the other books that might fix things. That's the only easy way for them to fix this error, is to correct the Rift. That way you only need to buy one replacement book. Otherwise, if they're trying to match the other books up to the Rift, they actually would have to now reprint Smoke and Shadow and North and South to match that. So I think it's clear. The Rift has caused the problems here. So yeah, that's the spine analysis. We'll see what they do with imbalance. There's not a lot left, you know, in terms of like the only thing missing is like so it's part of Zuko's fire attack, but half of Toph is missing. So I don't think they'll, you know, bother with that. Maybe they will just add it in at the end. But also, would they want a book that's not done, like where the art is not done by Team Gurihuru, to have Team Gurihuru art on it? That gives me the impression they might either be starting something new, or they'll just have a sort of, you know, the plain blue the whole way down, or something like that. More standard spine to the book. If they ever announce that book, I assume they will. It makes no sense not to, but it hasn't been announced yet. So yeah, let's get back to the video. And so that brings us back here to sort of just wrap up the video. I tend to always give at least a little bit of discussion on the story. Now, I've discussed this a lot over the years on my channel. When it first came out, I've done videos where I've come back to the comic series to basically review them. I really like North and South, especially compared to the sort of more recent content where it doesn't feel as meaningful. This was still when they were telling bigger, more meaningful stories with the comic trilogies. And in general, you know, the 5 books that Team Gurihuru do are all really, really strong. I do feel it ends up, you know, having maybe some weaknesses that some of the other comics maybe don't have. And it suffers a little bit from, almost having that sort of celebratory end of the creative team feeling to it, that they devote a little bit too much time to almost like celebrating at the end, that they don't have enough time to maybe go in depth on some of the plot points. But it's a really strong Katara story. Hakoda in this book I think is really, really interesting, and the north-south stuff I think is fascinating throughout. I just feel they never quite commit to telling you as much about it as they probably should tell you. But at its core, it is still a really strong book that has some really fun moments throughout. And if you're a Katara fan, I think you're absolutely going to love the arc that she goes on in this book. So that is basically, I think, everything there is to say about the North and South Omnibus. It's the format that I ultimately recommend to most people, unless you're like a hardcore collector, at which point the library edition probably is what you want to go for, because it has basically the best of everything that you actually want in terms of a release. The spine image works with smoke and shadow and seems to present the rift as the error on that side of things. So I do wish Dark Horse would just come out and say like something about it, just acknowledge the error and say that future printings of the Rift will be accurate or something like that. They haven't, and so I don't even know if there's a plan to correct it at all. So that's very unfortunate, but from here it's basically just, I guess they'll announce Imbalance Omnibus at some point. Turf Wars Omnibus, start the core ones. They could probably do with getting a reprint. It's just, where are the announcements? We're still waiting for just kind of almost anything to be announced at this point. So, yeah. In the comments, if you have any questions about the book or thoughts on it, if you've got your copy, definitely let me know. Other than that, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.